In November 1988, all three arms of the Indian Armed Forces participated in a less known but swift and effective operation in the Indian Ocean to defend the people and government of our friendly neighbor to the south, the Maldives, from an attempted armed coup. Over the course of the next few episodes, we are going to tell the story of that operation from four gentlemen who were in the thick of that action. I promise you some exciting stories such as secret radio code words, fake flight plans, paracommandos, and a chase on the high seas.
61-2, clear takeoff, left hand. Takeoff left, middle left, slim west, copy.
Hello and welcome to the Blueskies Podcast. I'm PR Ganapathy, your host.
Just need 70, roger, report IP southeast, connection, for the midway, and deal selected.
To start with, let me introduce and welcome my guests to the program. Firstly, then Brigadier, later General Prakash Malik, who was Chief of Army Staff during the Kargil War. Welcome to the program, General Malik. Thank you so much for doing this, sir.
Good evening, Ganapathy. Sir, my pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. We can just start off by a quick introduction of, at the time of Op Cactus, where were you, in what position, and...
Deputy Director General in the Military Operations Directorate of Army Headquarters at that time.
Our second key player is Group Captain Anant Bewoor. Welcome to the program, Group Captain Bewoor. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Great honor. Thank you, Gana. Thank you very much.
Sir, I'll take a little bit of your time to just ask you about, just the lead up to when you were in Agra in the 44 Squadron, leading up to Op Cactus.
I was selected for the IL-76 training in Soviet Union. Came back, we moved 44 Squadron from Chandigarh to Agra, and I was given command in September 1987. That's how I came to 44 Squadron as the commanding officer.
Our third guest is then Colonel, later Brigadier Subhash Joshi of the Paracommandos. Welcome to the program, sir. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
It's a pleasure and honor, Mr. Ganapathy.
Just to set the context, at that time you were commanding officer of 6 Para, if I remember correctly, and you were based in Agra, is it?
That's affirmative.
And our last and equally important guest, then Captain, later Commodore, Hari Anant Gokhale. Welcome to the program, sir, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ganapathy. My pleasure.
Sir, we'll just start off by some preliminaries. Where were you around that time in November 1988?
Okay, I was commanding officer Betwa in the year 1987-88.
So now that we know who the key players are, let's start with Brigadier Malik and let's listen to him describe what was going on in Delhi at that time.
Now, on that day, I went to the office at about 8:45 in the morning, and Vice Chief was going, our Vice Chief, General Rodriguez. He was leaving for a meeting in the Cabinet Secretariat with Cabinet Secretary. And while proceeding to his car, he met me and he asked me about Maldives. And he said that he was going to attend a meeting on Maldives, and that when I go to the office, I should open up the ops room and put up the maps of ops room and also see if there is any contingency plan that we have.
By this time, the news of the coup was all over the media and TV and things like that, right?
I don't know about the media, but definitely it was with our government, because since early morning, some people from Maldives had been ringing up our Prime Minister's office and home
Right.
and apprising him of this coup.
Right.
And that is how the Cabinet Secretary called a meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Right. Great. And so then what happened after that? So when General Rodriguez came back?
When he went there and from while returning from there, must have been about 9:45 or 10 o'clock, he rang me up. He said, warn 50 para brigade to be ready for a contingency outside our country. And also have the ops room ready because the Prime Minister is likely to come and hold a meeting at about 11 o'clock. So I prepared the ops room. At that time, we did not have any maps of Maldives. So I made use of some charts, naval charts, which were there. I put them up on a blackboard and looked up if there was any contingency plan. I found one which had been prepared some years ago.
Right.
And it was mentioning about a whole brigade group going to Maldives, and apparently it was quite out of sync, out of context, which we were now having.
Right.
So it wasn't of any use, but then, I got some background information about Maldives from that, including about the airfield and the Malé as a capital, etc.
Right. Down in Agra, in the meantime, Group Captain Bewoor was having a pretty ordinary day.
The operation was quite a surprise when I look back now, because 3rd November 88 was a very normal day, Thursday. The next day, the IPKF courier followed by the Assam courier was to leave. And then Colonel Joshi, CO6 Para, whose family is from Sikkim, was taking a lift with me to Bagogra so that he could go up to meet his family. And just after the normal morning briefings, we came back to the squadron, and the duty ops officer came across to me and said, "Sir, we've just received a message from the base ops that we need to put 3 aircraft on a standby status of 3 hours." Now, this was a very normal thing for us in 44 Squadron, because whenever there was any firefighting to be done in the country, rioting or disaster relief, etc., we would get a standby hukum from Delhi or from Allahabad. And so we said, fine. The 3 crew were detailed by the flight commander and all the other leaders, and they were sent home to collect their baggage and come with 2 nights kit, which is the standard operating procedure. Now, we didn't know why the standby had been given.
Right.
So we moved into the briefing room where we had a small TV, and we put it on. That's where we heard that there had been some kind of a coup in Maldives, and that the government of India had been approached by them. And the TV announcer, there was only Doordarshan then, there was no cable TV, it was only single. They kept saying that, yes, the government says that they will do everything to help Maldives. So we concluded that Malé must be the target. And that's how we decided, because nothing else was happening in India. Srinagar, Jorhat, Chennai, Hyderabad, everything was nice and quiet, and no fires, no rioting. So we concluded that it must be Malé, but no instructions to us at that point in time.
Right.
So what the NAV leader did was, he said, okay, he told the young navigators who were there with him to go and enter the waypoints into the aircraft navigation computer from Agra to Male via Trivandrum. So that's the only thing we did at that moment in the 3 designated aircraft.
We returned to Brigadier Malik in Delhi. And so, did you put the Air Force squadron, transport squadrons on alert and standby, or did that happen through the Air Headquarters ops room?
No, apparently, both the Vice Chief of Air Staff had also attended the Cabinet Secretary's meeting. He had warned 44th Squadron in Agra.
Right.
And both the Vice Chief of the Army and the Air, they came back together at about 10 o'clock to the ops room.
Right.
And that is how I got to know that both the IL-76 Squadron as well as Para Brigade, whom I had spoken to,
right,
they had been warned for the contingency.
In the meantime, also in Agra, Colonel Joshi and his paras had been warned, and they were beginning to get ready. And in general, any regiment like the para, which is expected to be a quick reaction regiment because of your ability to be airborne and so on and so forth. What are the normal policies or practices in terms of readiness and whatnot for your organization? How many hours of notice do you need to be, ready to move and things like that?
We will not talk about the notice and things, but I will tell you, when we are told to be ready, we are ready to move quickly. That should be enough. And the point here is that at the point of time that I got orders to move, it was in an excised area, which was not too far off from where my battalion location is.
Right.
So we could move very quickly. And since we were in the excise mode, my orders to the battalion were, whenever we move on an excise, I don't want to carry, as we do usually in peacetime, just the rifles which are no more than a stick or a staff.
Right.
So I had said we will move always with a full pouch ammunition. Pouch ammunition implies that the what we call the first line ammunition that's available to a soldier, it's divided into 2 parts. Pouch ammunition, what the soldier fills up in the magazines and carries with him.
Right.
The rest of the first line ammunition is what you might call the subunit reserve, which is not filled up in the magazines and not carried.
Okay.
So I said pouch ammunition will be carried. The company reserve, which is a part of the first line, will be carried in the company vehicle. Under these circumstances is how we were ready to move very quickly, actually. And with that having been said, I had also ordered that this magazine where we have our ammunition stored, which was located in Agra Fort. And this used to be a bit of an obstruction in moving quickly. So what I had done on taking over command of the battalion, which is only in July that year, I said, I will not have my ammunition in the magazine. I'll move the first line ammunition, the whole first line, into the subunits. And we took the necessary precautions for ammunition storage. And I moved that, which helped.
Wonderful. Okay. And so you were out with the unit in the field when you got the first notice that you might be called to act?
We were in Agra. We were in Agra, but at that point of time, there was a small exercise that I had planned with the company. We were in that exercise area, which was not too far off from my permanent location of the battalion.
Okay. You got a signal over the wireless? You got a wireless message?
Yes, I got a radio message. I simply got a radio message, which was around, I would say, I had closed up the exercise at 5 in the morning. And I told the boys to rest for a while, and then we'll walk back to the battalion. And now when this happened, I got a radio message from the headquarters to be there as of yesterday.
Wow.
So I did realize that when the brigade major tells me that move as of yesterday, it has to be urgent, something very urgent and
Right.
possibly operational. What I did was I quickly got into my vehicle and went straight to the brigade headquarters. And there I met the brigade major, and the brigade commander was already there. Time now, a little past 10 o'clock.
Little past 10. Okay, wow.
Yeah. And the brigade commander told me what the situation was, what the whole story was about, the whole rush was about. And
Okay.
I started talking to him, and he told me the following things. Number one, that there had been a coup in Maldives. And estimated number of the rebels was somewhere between 200 and 500. I mean, something, you would call it a very, very specific information.
Right.
200 to 500 was the ambiguity.
Okay, wow.
That I will be required to move and with a company in IL-76 aircraft and be prepared to move forthwith. So all that I did was, my boys had about 3-4 hours of sleep, the ones in the exercise area. So I told them to move straight to the airport.
Okay.
I told the company commander this is something operational. Two other things that I did was, one, I thought that this might escalate. So I warned the second company.
Okay.
Third thing that I did was that there was a company of mine which was guarding the FOD. That's the not the FOD, the ordnance depot in Agra.
Right.
Now this is a sequel to. You would remember that just the previous year there had been some explosions in the Jabalpur ammunition depot.
Jabalpur, that's right, yes.
Right. In view of that, the defense minister himself had ordered that the ammunition depots and such sensitive installations will be protected by regular troops. So at this time around, it was my turn.
Okay.
So I had provided a company there, which of course, no soldier likes to do that kind of a thing in a peacetime.
Right.
So I thought that was a very good opportunity. So I told my company commander, move there forthwith and be ready to move back to the battalion forthwith and be ready to move to the airport on orders. So the slow came back, came to me a little while later. And in the meantime, brigade commander had finished my briefing. And I told the two company commanders that this is where we are going. And in the middle of that briefing, I got another message from the brigade major to get back to the brigade headquarters. I quickly rattled out the information that I had got. Repeat the information, the two things that I told you, Maldives, 200 to 500 troops.
Right.
And to add, on arrival, the commander added that they were operating from a red mothership. And they were using the speedboats that were located, they could find there in the harbor in Mali.
Okay.
And for commuting. And the telephone exchange, the NSS headquarters was under siege, and the telephone exchange, and other important installations, radio station, TV station, etc., etc. They were all under the rebel control.
Right.
Right.
Were you informed also that there were some hostages, like the education minister, for example?
No, I was told that I'll be jumping. But I was also told, there was a rider, that the troops might be increased, and if the airfield was not safe, then I might have to stay in Trivandrum for 2 to 3, maybe up to 4 days, and then get launched.
Okay.
So with that rider in mind, 2 to 3 days stay, this, that, and the other, I told my boys that also collect some tentage. And the tentage was sent later on by the quartermaster when we were still at the airport. All that having been said, what we did was, after I came back, told the company commanders, the first one had already moved. The second one, who was still waiting, I told him also to move in anticipation. And as I was moving back, the commander says, "Hey, Joe, there's another call." I said, "What is it?" He said, "Now the level is 2 companies and the takeoff is at 12:30.
Wow.
I said, "Fine," because my second company was there. All that they had to do was drive. And in the meantime, I had warned my one of the other company commanders to go draw the parachutes and let the first company commander do the fit shoot. And now I had the adjutant call this company commander up, told him to draw parachutes to 2 companies. All that under control. So I now got to do the rest of my morning shows. And having done that, now I told you about the total information that we had was what the brigade commander told me.
Were you told what sort of troops or rebels these were? That these were Tamil rebels? Did you know
They
if they
said
were?
that they are rebels. That's all.
That's all.
Which rebels, who, this, that, and the other was not known to us.
Right. And what sorts of weapons they had? Did you have any information about
I
that?
mentioned to you that the weapons were the normal infantry weapons. But in addition, what I had forgotten to tell you was, in addition, I was also told that they may be having SAMs.
SAMs, oh boy, okay.
So there you are. You're being a flyer, you know what it means.
Right. Yes. Now, finally, I believe you found they had RPGs, but you were not told, you were not given any advance intimation that they might have RPGs.
As I usually say, intelligence was very conspicuous by the lack of it.
Right.
So so we moved. Now I was just pondering in my mind as to what the hell do I do if my troops and the rebels, who may be fortified by that time, are equal in number. So I had to think of something special.
Right, correct.
That's what was going on through my mind.
Visual before noon, just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection, before midway, and yield selected.
And let's not forget the third leg of this troika of the Indian Armed Forces, the Navy. So down south in Cochin, Commodore Gokhale was summoned to the CNC to receive his orders.
I was in Cochin, the ship was tied up alongside. And nothing was there in the store because being a training ship, we had finished some sort of a training earlier and I was in harbor. And then I got this summons from the headquarters asking to come and report to the CNC to get some briefing on some incident. I was totally, because there's no easy communication, no net, nothing. And therefore, this coup also, which happened in Mali, which we came to know about subsequently, it became known to me only when I got my briefing on 3rd inside the ops room of Southern Naval Command.
Okay. Wow. So can we just back up, sir? What is INS Betwa? When, what sort of ship was it? And what sorts of things would it do normally in the course of its operations?
INS Betwa was then called Air Defense Frigate. In the Second World War, these ships were used primarily for providing screen to the main formation. And the major threats being air and underwater, there is to be general purpose frigates which you could do both, that is anti-aircraft and anti-submarine defense. Some were categorized for anti-submarine defense. In that particular way, this was called Air Defense Frigate. Its sensors and weapons were meant for dealing with aircrafts. Now, please understand one thing: these ships were building in the late 50s, and therefore the entire concept of warfare was entirely different than what it is today. To cut the story short,
Right.
this ship was supposed to deal with aircraft threat. Mostly, there are no missiles those days, so that's about all. Deal with aircrafts. They
Right.
also could be used against other ships because the armament was could be used for, and that's what we actually used it in this particular operations. That means the gun, which had a dual purpose of anti-aircraft and anti-ship. So we used the anti-ship part of it. But it's a very old ship. Technology was old.
And you were saying this was a training ship, so this was used to train the staff, officers, and ratings of the Navy.
That is true because the ship had become old. By the time it was my command, it was about 25 years plus, and therefore, it's if you can use the term frontline role had diminished, and because weaponry was, like I said, missiles had come on the scene, so weaponry was not so suitable. Plus, the ship had aged. Now, in these sort of cases, it is an excellent platform for training cadets, which is in their younger years, we gave them the seamanship skills, which are actually they're required for throughout your life. But that is the basic, like basic navigation, seamanship. So, excellent platform to train cadets, and that's what we are doing that time.
And you said the ship was tied alongside, and it's I think much easier to get an aircraft started and to depart on a mission, but I'm sure to get a Navy ship going takes a lot more effort. So can you give us a sense for how the Navy thinks about readiness and quickly moving something, and how these ships are prepared for that?
Interesting question because the comparison as a concept what you're saying is absolutely correct because any unit which is operational ought to be ready in a given specified time for a mission to be accomplished. By that logic, aircrafts can be got ready much earlier, but ships have to
Right.
take more time, and therefore it is defined in our what we call them as operating instructions that an operational ship should be able to put to sea with everything available on board, which means manpower, equipment, weaponry, fuel, and water to sail and leave harbor within 4 hours. And therefore,
4 hours. Wow.
yeah, 4 hours is the time, and that's normally adequate because you cannot afford to have any defect which will affect your operational readiness when you're supposed to be operational. Because if you have a defect, then you tell the command, "Hello, I'm having a defect, so maybe I won't be able to be ready for operations." But if you don't say so, it is taken for granted that you are ready. That way, Bedford was ready on that day, and we did sail within the stipulated time of 4 hours.
That is amazing. I mean, I had no idea it would be so short. I was thinking it would take a day or two to get a ship ready. And so you're fueled up, your armaments on board, your supplies are on board, and I guess you sound a general recall of something of some sort, and then the people who have to man the ship will come back to the ship, I guess, right?
Yes, sir. Because the when the ship has to be sailed, the command will say, "Be ready to put to sea by so and so time." They also know that we require 4 hours, so they stipulate the time. It is my responsibility
Right.
to ensure that everything is available. So I recall my men. Could be some ration pani short. I get it done, and that was wonderfully done in Cochin because the moment they realized the ship is moving, the entire base was as if ready to. I'll put it both ways, ready to ensure that we are pushed out in time. Or I'll put it more kindly, they're ready to ensure that we
Right.
are ready for the mission. Either way, it works out pretty well.
Uh-huh.
And like I said, it is given in the book. We have to follow it.
Okay.
There's no choice at all.
Right. Right. And I presume you all practice this regularly, this sort of quickly on short notice putting out to sea?
There's no practice required because once in the operating principle, then you always back from mind. Now, for example, I may have some machinery which has got a temporary defect and all. I want to open it up. So I asked my technical officer, how long will this take? If he says, sir, I can sort of patch it up within 2 hours and be ready to proceed to sea, I have no issue. I don't tell anybody. But if he says, sir, this is going to take more than 8 hours, then I tell the higher authorities, sorry, this is what, and then they allow me, and then I do that. Otherwise, you're supposed to be ready. There's no practice required per se. It is just a taken for granted. You have to do it.
Okay. Sorry, sir. So we're coming back to, you were called to the command briefing room, and what did they tell you at that time?
They said that a situation is developing somewhere to the south of India, south or southwest, and be ready to proceed to sea. Then very briefly, because it was sometimes 9:30, and if I remember correctly, all the so-called coup had occurred the previous night or early morning. So what the command also didn't have too many details. So they just said, be ready. And there's been something like similar like a coup there. And the Navy may have to intervene exactly how we were not told. But I was told categorically, don't tell anybody about this development. Just be ready to proceed to sea. So I just
Right.
couldn't share this information with anyone. Came on board and tell the guys, get ready. We are sailing in 4 hours.
And the chain of command in a ship, I mean, we hear this term XO, that's your kind of right-hand person who gets a lot of the stuff done. Is that right?
Yeah, it's like this. The command is the top of the echelon. And then he has a line authority through primarily four officers, you may say. One is XO, that is executive officer. He's also called a first lieutenant. He's supposed to look after the operational side. Then there is an engineering officer who looks after the propulsion side. There is the electrical officer who looks after the power generation and distribution side, and weapons also, yeah, because the weapons come under electrical officer. And finally, there is a logistics officer. So these are your four immediate subordinate. But in the Navy, in case the CO gets shot up in action, then XO takes over as the commanding officer. He takes over the command. So he is primarily considered first among the four equals.
And so you could not even share this information with your XO, is it?
No, and it is not really required because my mind is already running. This is going to be something to do with
Right.
coup. There is going to be some sort of a gun reaction, and therefore, it's like a revision happening in the mind. Okay, my guns are okay, my things are okay,
Right.
my radars are okay, my ammunition is okay, and so I'm reassured to a certain extent. So I didn't have to share this information. I wish I could, but when I was told
Right.
not to, then it is so.
Right. And did you have the necessary maps and things like that on board already for that area? What sort of stock of maps do you normally carry on a ship?
Interesting question because it's not only having the maps that is important. There is something called corrections because the oceanic conditions like depths of water or new marks or new dangers are never static or stationary. They keep on changing, and therefore there's a proper international organization to inform all the sailing ships about these changes that occur hydrographically or in the charts, etc. And then you keep on getting those corrections, and it is your responsibility to ensure that those corrections are up to date. That is the currency of the chart you have to ensure. And the area, for example, Betwa couldn't have gone to Pacific or Atlantic to operations. They don't require those charts here.
Right.
Whereas I shall be operating and say within about say 200, 300, 400 miles from this the Indian coastline. So those maps we had. So we have the maps for our neighboring countries, and that is always there. And in case some special requirement comes up, for example, you may recollect in 2004 there was a tsunami, and this Indian ship very diligently in time rendered help to the affected area called Aceh.
Right.
Now the ship may not have, I'm just speculating, ship may not have had those charts, then it is done by the command to ensure the charts are supplied. So that is pretty sort of well streamlined. That problem never comes up.
So now that the three key players have been put on alert and are making their necessary preparations, let's shift the focus back to Brigadier Malik in Delhi and see what happened in the Prime Minister's meeting. And so after that, what was the planning that went on in the morning, sir?
It was interesting. It was a meeting to be chaired by the Prime Minister, but then he had invited ministers as well as officials from different ministries, including the External Affairs Minister. There was Minister of State from Home, Mr. Chidambaram, and then, of course, various secretaries, head of RAW, head of IB. In fact, the whole ops room got filled up and we had to keep extra chair. And so then the meeting started, and Prime Minister's Joint Secretary, Ronan Sen, he briefed us about the situation in Maldives. And as I mentioned, that the rebels headed by Luthfee, a Maldivian, they had gone in a ship and they had entered Male, and they apparently wanted to carry out a coup in that. So there was some firing going on outside the National Security Service headquarters, which was in a small fort-like location. So all this information was given to us by Ronan Sen, and he had said that he is in touch. Off and on, he gets a call from the Foreign Secretary of Maldives government. And Mr. Abdul Gayoom, the president of Maldives, he had gone into hiding.
Right.
And so he briefed us about this whole situation. And then after the briefing, the Prime Minister told that he had been contacted and he had promised them help as early as possible. And then he asked the Vice Chief of Army Staff and the Air Staff and the Naval Vice Chief also who had come by then to let him know what could be done in this situation. The first person to speak was, I think, the Vice Chief of Air Staff, Air Marshal Suri, Nirmal Suri. And so Nirmal Suri narrated that this is it's about 4 hours flight from Agra to Maldives. And we have the capability of IL-76 flights going up to that place directly. But we do not know whether Halule, the airfield, is held by the rebels, or is it can we land there? And there will be problem. He also mentioned about the problems if we were to do any para-landing. And he mentioned that in case we have to do para-landing, then we will have to depend on AN-32 planes, which will take time to reach, because they will require refueling en route, and they will take much longer to reach Maldives. So he explained this whole situation, and then the Vice Chief of the Army Staff, he mentioned that, well, we have warned Para Brigade, we still don't know how many troops will be required. As according to our old contingency plan, it is about a brigade worth, which will take time to be mobilized.
Right.
The Naval Vice Chief, he said that none of our naval ships will be able to reach that location in less than 36 to 48 hours. Which promptly the Prime Minister said, okay, look, that is not a solution because we can't wait for that long. So with that, the meeting started off, and ultimately when we came to about para-landing, how it will be done, he wanted to know if we were to land at Halule airfield, what will be the situation there. So we had one para-brigade officer in the MO Directorate, Military Operations Directorate. I brought him there, Sapat Nekar. Now, Halule is, that time it was about 3,000 meters long, if I remember. But
Right.
the width of that airfield was just about 500 meters.
Right. It just about takes in the runway, I think.
Yes, it was barely the runway.
Mm.
And even to go from Halule to Male, we had to go in boats.
Right, right.
And the boat would have taken maybe about half an hour or so to reach the capital.
Right.
And there were just one or two huts at the airfield, nothing beyond that.
Right.
So we gave this information, and Sapatnekar said that, look, IL-76, if we try and drop the paratroopers from that, half of them will land in the sea.
Oh my.
On the very sharp corals which are all around the Halule airstrip. And they will get hurt. The troops will get hurt. And the other troops, some troops will also get drowned because they will be carrying heavy load.
Heavy load.
And he put the figure, he said, I don't expect more than 50% people will be able to land properly for any action.
Wow.
So he gave this picture, and to the Prime Minister. Prime Minister asked him a few questions, but this is what it was decided. And finally, the plan that was made around about 12:30, 1 was that because speed was of paramount importance, so we should go in IL-76 and try and land at Halule Airport. And in case landing is not possible, then we should come back to Trivandrum.
Right.
This was confirmed that this one sortie over Halule airfield could be done before coming back to, we couldn't do more than one chakkar that.
Right.
And we had to, then if this landing was not possible, then we will have to go next morning in AN-32 for a paradrop. Now,
Right.
paradrop also had a problem. Of course, inside the Malay town, there was just a football field in one corner of that where some landing could take place. Otherwise, they were all huts, right next to each other, and there was no open space at all.
Right, right.
And the height, I think, was just about 10-15 meters of that particular. These are coral island, and there's no tree or nothing of that nature.
Right.
So this was a contingency plan that in case you can land, fine, carry out the action. If you cannot land, then come back to Trivandrum and fly next morning in AN-32s for a paralanding.
Paralanding, okay. And what was the side of intelligence you were getting of how many rebels were there, and how reliable was that in your opinion at that point?
Ganapati, there was absolutely no intelligence, I can tell you.
Right.
So much so that even the head of RAW, he asked me what is happening there.
Wow.
When he came to the ops room. Now, all information that we had was from the Foreign Secretary of Maldives government, who off and on would keep in touch with Ronan Sen.
Okay.
And he was giving this information. And one of the information before we finished, our meeting got over, was that there don't seem to be any rebels on Halule airfield. And we have some people who are manning the ATC. This was the last information we got from him through Ronan Sen.
Right,
But
those are very critical pieces of information, I'm
it
sure.
was.
Yeah.
It was indeed. And so with this information and the contingency plan, the meeting got over at 1 o'clock. And as I mentioned to you, I was there, and along with me, Ashok Goyal was there, the first squadron commander of 44th Squadron.
Okay, right.
Who had brought, in fact, IL-76
From Russia. Okay.
He was also with me at that time. So before the meeting, soon after the meeting got over, both the Vice Chief of the Army and the Air Force, they called us both, and they said that, look, we can't get involved in writing any messages or trying to ring up each other. Both of you have seen the whole you've been attending this meeting. Now you go to Agra and brief the squadron commander, at that time Group Captain Bewoor, and Brigadier Bulsara, the commander of 50 Para Brigade. You will have no role in fighting, but you will be liaison officers from the Army headquarters and the Air headquarters. And if there is any problem, then you will keep in touch with us. And so just before I was going, in fact, General Roddick said, you don't come back. You go with the Para Brigade to Maldives.
Oh, really? He said that. Okay.
And I, in fact, joked. I said, sir, I don't have any weapons. You want me to go with my briefcase? He said, yes, it doesn't matter. You go with your briefcase. So from that, at about, I think, 1:15 or 1:30, I collected whatever charts and a few photographs that I could get hold of by that time.
Right.
And Ashok and I, we left for Palam Airport, got into AL-32, it was ready.
I think at Donier, actually, I think you flew.
Well, I don't remember,
right.
One of the flights. And we got into that and we flew down to Agra. I think we must have reached Agra at about 3 o'clock.
Right.
Visual before visualize. Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection for midway, and deal selected.
So back to Agra, where we asked Group Captain Bewoor to tell us a little more about the navigation system in the IL-76 and the sort of information that the squadron had for trips like this. If I can just ask you there, what sort of navigation equipment did the IL-76 have at that time? And as a squadron, I'm presuming that you all would be flying international courier sorties. And so did you have subscription to JEP charts and things like that at that time?
We did have JEPs and charts were given to us from Air headquarters. They did not come directly. And for the people who are listening, we did not have current JEPs and charts. The navigation system in the IL was known as the coup. It was a computer into which you could feed in about 9 to 10 waypoints, and you connected the coup to your autopilot, and the aeroplane flew over all the waypoints where the coordinates were entered into the navigation system. It was
And this was using inertial. This was an inertial navigation.
No, not inertial. Nothing to do with inertial. No GPS. Nothing. You fed in the waypoints and told the computer that this is where the aeroplane should go. And if the autopilot was coupled with that computer, the autopilot took the aeroplane to those coordinates. Every now and then.
So these were using ground-based navaids.
Ground-based coordinates, lat long, that's all. Nothing else.
Okay.
Nothing. I mean, it was a very simple, rudimentary navigation system. You had to tell the computer, where do you want to go? And every now and then, as we were flying, the navigator updated his position by looking as to his actual ground position and told the computer that this is exactly where we are, because the computer developed errors as you kept flying, like any equipment does. That's how the navigation was done in the IL-76. Pretty accurate. It would bring you to your destination pretty accurately when you had to take over visually after some time.
And you had VOR receivers and ADF and things like that also?
We had ADF, VOR was there, ILS was there, all this was there. But for the moment, we had only presumed that it is Maldives. No one told us anything. And as time went by, it was now about 10 o'clock when we were ready. Our 3 aircraft were ready. All IL-76s at that time, I don't know now, but at that time, all aircraft were loaded with 40 tons of fuel. because from Agra, 40 tons could take you to any part of India.
Okay.
So whether it was Chabua in the far east or Nalia in the west, Srinagar or Chennai, Trivandrum, 40 tons would take you wherever you were told to go from Agra.
Right.
And since we had got no formal hukum, we maintained 40 tons because it would take us to Trivandrum.
Right.
That was definite. So that is how we were at 1000 hours. And what the flight commanders had done is that if it was going to be Malé, we reckoned that it would not stop at 2 aircraft. So the engineering officer was told to prepare another 2 aeroplanes. And also to get his ground crew who would go in the aeroplane. We always carried technicians of various trades in every aeroplane which went out of Agra to carry out the servicing at the other end, the refueling and that kind of a thing. So he activated his people. They also went. The aircrew transport went, picked up everybody. And like I said, at 10 o'clock, we were ready with 3 aircraft. And the whole thing was repeated for 2 more aircraft.
Okay.
That is how by about, I'd say 11:30, 12 o'clock, we were ready with 5 aircraft. The flight commanders, nav leader, gunnery leader, the engineering officer, squad leader, Bhatnagar, they had got the whole system going.
Right.
I did nothing. I just went to my office, and there's a lot of paperwork to be done, and so many signatures. Without the CEO signature, nothing moves. So I was sitting there upstairs, and these guys were doing the whole thing. They knew what to do, and they were doing it beautifully.
And so, how is the internal configuration of the bay of the IL-76? I presume, if you're carrying vehicles versus equipment versus troops, you'll have to reconfigure that. How did you configure the aircraft at that point? You didn't know what you were going to carry?
In this case, Gana, we kept all aircraft as if we are going to carry cargo. We did not put the seating fitments at all, because when you carry people and you put seat fitment, it is a double-decker system.
Right.
And from that, that is meant for carrying passengers on a scheduled courier, because each seat has an oxygen outlet and an oxygen mask is connected in case of decompression at altitude and so on.
Right.
This we felt was going to be an operational task. So we didn't put the seating configuration. We just kept the cargo compartment completely empty so that it could troops, it could take weapons, ammunition, any vehicles, any guns, whatever it is that we want to. We were ready to carry all kinds of equipment. May have been decided by the Army or Air Army headquarters and so on. And we'd done these rehearsals earlier. We had practiced with the para. The para brigade is in Agra. We were in Agra. And we had done a lot of rehearsals of loading, offloading. It creates a lot of confidence with the gunners and the load masters and the people from the para brigade, because they know how to load first, second, third, fourth, because you've got to do it in reverse. You've got to keep at the loading still what you need first on ground. And we've done this exercise both for paradrop as well as for air-landed operations.
Right.
And another thing which very few people know, I must tell all the listeners that this Operation Cactus is highly unknown, if I may say that, because it not been, nobody's written about it till very recently.
Yes.
And what we did a little practice, we used to do rehearsals in the squadron, where we would fly in a formation of 3 aircraft with a distance of 1.5 kilometers behind each other.
Right.
And because the IL can land in an extremely short distance if required, we did this rehearsal both in Agra and in Gwalior, where the first IL of this 3 aircraft formation would land on, and we did it at Gwalior. The first aircraft would land, stop by halfway position. If required, the troops would deplane and run off the run. And the IL thereafter could take off.
My goodness.
From
Wow.
it could take off from half the length of the runway, because a normal runway is, about 9,000 feet. You could get airborne. An empty aeroplane would get airborne within half the length of the runway. And the second aircraft would come and go to the end of the runway and clear, and then offload his craft. And then the third aeroplane would come and do that. We did a couple of rehearsals of this just in case we thought we are likely to get into this, because by the middle of 1988, we had been supporting IPKF for nearly 9 months now, since September 87. So we felt that if such kind of exercise would be required, how would we go about doing a thing like this? We won't talk about that because some of it, I would imagine, is still confidential, and they may not want to know what it is that we had planned to do. But we practiced this. We did practice this. So we knew what it was to do formation 1.5 distance. And it came very useful when we had to actually get airborne for Cactus. But let's get back now at 10:00 hours, 3rd November at Agra.
Right.
We were waiting for orders. We rang up the base ops, which is what you normally do. I tried to ring up Allahabad Central Air Command, but they were having a seminar on flight safety. So everybody was there. In fact, my own AOC was in Allahabad.
Oh, boy.
And all the AOCs of Central Air Command were in Allahabad. All the CEOs of the fighter squadrons of Central Air Command were in Allahabad. And so we were all alone here. I mean, we had no further instructions, but neither Central Air Command nor the coup's office could give us any inputs. And there was no question of bringing up air headquarters. As I tell the story, the listeners will come to know it would have been futile to ring up air headquarters, because the right people were not in air headquarters at all. They were in army headquarters.
Okay.
So the listeners should know what was actually happening in Delhi as we go along in Delhi. So all this input. Now, by now, no hukum. It is now 11 o'clock when we get an order to say that your standby status has been upgraded to 1 hour. Now, 1 hour standby status is not a comfortable thing to remain in for a long period. Because the crew go to the aircraft, they check it out, the ground power units are connected, the airmen are standing around the aeroplane. You think that you will get the signal and orders any time now so that you can start your engines. There are 4 of them to start, various things to be done. And with a 1 hour standby status, we should have had some idea as to what is our cargo.
Right.
Up to now, we did not know who do we carry. Now the para brigade is next door. But during our discussions, we said that if our fuel operating has not been ordered more than 40 tons, it obviously means we are going to land in some airfield in India.
Right.
Trivandrum being the closest, we thought we'll be there. We know that there is a brigade in Trivandrum. We thought that would be the task force.
Right.
And
right,
so it will remain 40 tons. We did not contact the para brigade because on what basis do we contact the para brigade?
right.
Maybe they were not the task force.
Yeah.
So we just kept quiet, and the one thing that all the leaders had done is they called the whole lot of air crew back to the squadron. And the cook, Mastram, had been told to prepare lunch. And
Right.
the moment the lunch had been prepared, he had been given orders that you will have to make packed dinner. So that part, the admin part of it, had been taken care of by the flight commander. And everybody was now waiting for instructions. Kahan jana hai? So that was the situation when we were told that your standby status is 1 hour. So the crew went to the aeroplane. They went through the checks, etc. And within half an hour, since we had got no further information, they de-energized the aeroplane. The ground power units were shut down. The airmen came back to their place, and the air crew came back to the squadron. And fortunately, it was November. The weather was nice.
Nice.
It was getting cold, and everybody was sitting outside in the lawns outside the squadron. And we were just waiting, hanging around.
Right. What was going through your mind, sir? What feelings or what thoughts or emotions were going through your mind?
Well, quite frankly, I was not really looking at this after having had a discussion with the NAV leader and all the other people. The signals leader had prepared whatever, their frequencies, what is required. And they have all this very much ready with them in their bags. Which, if we are going to Trivandrum, who all do we have to contact? They know that. We know that. Navigators had some old, they had their maps, etc., everything ready. We had some old Jepson charts. They told me that these are outdated Jepson charts. I think they're issued every 3 months, 90 days.
Right. Right.
So we didn't have the latest ones. We knew that there is a runway there and there is a VOR and that kind of. But then that was about all.
And at this point, had you decided that you would fly personally, or were there other crews that you had assigned to this sortie?
No. This decision is always taken by the flight commander. As the CEO, I never interfered. If the flight commander told me, sir, you are flying, I flew.
Right.
If the flight commander said, you're not flying, I didn't fly. In my book, the commanding officer does not interfere with the flight commander, NAV leader, etc., unless he thinks there's something terribly wrong.
Right.
So at that time, I was ready to fly. And so there it was. I was upstairs. You see, it is a floor building, the old building where 5 squadron Canberras used to be located when they were in Agra. And one of the funny things that happened is that as we approached lunch hour, on the intercom, I called up the flight commander. I got no reply. I called up the NAV leader who was in the next room, no reply. Signals leader, gunnery leader, no reply. So I came out of my office onto the veranda and to see as to where is everybody gone. And I found that everyone was having a sumptuous lunch on the squadron lawns. So I said, guys, what are you doing? They said, sir, we are having lunch. We don't know what time the takeoff will come. Right. So I said, how about keeping a plate for me? And that is how I came down. They said, yes, sir, it's all ready. So at lunch hour, 1:30, we were on a 1 hour standby. We were ready to go to Malik. as far as we were concerned, but we didn't have the fuel to go there.
Right.
We could only get up to Trivandrum. And then we decided that let's have a nice lunch. And we knew that good old Mastram is making packed dinner
Right.
because he was also not allowed to go back.
And so this situation where, you're put on alert and then, stood down because something doesn't materialize, is this something that, used to happen often, or was this an unusual
Yeah.
event for you?
No. This is a very regular thing.
Uh-huh.
Even when I was serving on the AN-12s, if there was a crisis, I can imagine the government through the MOD telling air headquarters that such is the problem, we will require, etc. Essentially, what is it that you did?
Right.
You got everyone from Chandigarh or Agra. And we done it earlier in December 1987. There were elections in Assam, and we had taken a large number of CRPF, BSF, and state reserve police, etc., troops from all over India into Assam to, during the elections. They need a lot of paramilitary forces.
Right.
So this is a very normal thing. You're put on standby. It takes about 3-4 hours for the hukum to come. And then they tell you, okay, you 1 aircraft here, 1 aircraft there, 2 aircraft here, and so on and so forth. And at that airfield, the local coup gets further instructions. And then you go to wherever you're supposed to go. So here too, we wait. This is a very normal thing for transport squadrons of the Air Force. Very normal. Nothing extraordinary. But since the TV was not talking about any problem in India, we concluded, and Doordarshan throughout the time was saying we will have, even All India Radio was saying that, that India has agreed they will help Malay and so on and so forth. So we said, Malay hoga. Apart from being prepared and having a map and a chart, there was nothing that we could do because by lunchtime, we didn't know a thing. And that is when we started seeing the maroon berets drifting on our tarmac.
So for the audience who don't know what a maroon beret is, you'll have to tell us.
So now it is time for the listeners to understand why is it that the maroon berets started gathering on the tarmac of 44 Squadron.
Just 70, Roger, report time southeast, connection for midway, and deal still active.
Well, folks, that's all we have time for this week. Join us again next week. In the meantime, sign up for updates at blueskiespodcast.com. There you'll find links to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can also write to us with your comments, questions, suggestions, and feedback from the website or to blueskies@prganapati.com. Subscribe to the podcast on any podcasting platform such as Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and even on YouTube. If you like what you heard, share it with your friends, give us a rating in your favorite podcasting app, and write us a review. It will help other people find us. I want to give my thanks to Saurav Chordia for our logo and Prithvik for the music. I want to reiterate that all the views expressed here are personal, and this podcast has not been approved by or reviewed by the Air Force, Ministry of Defense, or any branch of the government. In the meantime, stay safe and Jai Hind.